Shopify grows with your business no matter how far or big you grow. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to grow your business no matter what stage you're in.
This is The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. Lift heavy. That is very common advice when runners ask about strength training. We should mostly run easy and then lift heavy. But what in the world does that really mean? Because the advice to lift heavy for marathon runners really doesn't seem to make any sense. I don't know about you, but when I'm in full-on marathon mode, the last thing I want to do is lift heavy. I'm already tired from running, and I certainly don't want to lift a bunch of heavy weights and become even more tired and sore before my next run. But the truth is, lifting heavy isn't always the best advice for runners. Runners actually want to do runner-specific strength work. Except runner-specific strength training doesn't really exist. Are you confused yet? Let's sort this out. Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and my mission is to help you improve your running, your mindset, and your life with science-backed training and plant-based nutrition. On today's show, we'll untangle the confusion around strength training for runners with the help of strength and running coach and physical therapist, Victoria Sekely. You'll learn exactly what lifting heavy means for runners and if you should even try it, how your strength training could change over the year depending on your goals, and how to time your workouts so they support your running instead of hurting it. Victoria is the owner of Train Smart, Run Strong, a New Jersey-based doctor of physical therapy and running coach. She trains runners all over the world with her strength training programs with the goal of keeping them healthy, strong, and training well. This is the second time Victoria has been on the show, and I am delighted to have her back. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned all the way to the end of the conversation for another Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. And now my conversation with Dr. Victoria Sekely. Welcome to The Planted Runner, Victoria.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Claire.
Yeah, you were on about a year ago, but I think it's time to have you back again because honestly, I'm getting so many questions about strength training and there's so much information out there. And honestly, I think there's a lot of runners that are sort of getting lost with what the heck am I supposed to do? So let's start at the very beginning. How strong do runners really need to be?
That's a good question. And just before we get into that, I want to acknowledge that the strength training for runners topic is so nuanced and there really is so much information online. And, just from us chatting before when I was on last time, that this is really one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm really happy that we're going to dive into this. But in terms of how strong runners should be, that's going to depend on how we define strength in general, right? And so I want to kind of make this, I want to kind of allow you to see it in two different ways, right? Because there's strength when it comes to typical strength training, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the best and the most strong for your running, right? Because strength training can only go so far, right? When we talk about what is actually going to be beneficial for your running, it doesn't necessarily mean that the strongest people in the world will be the best runners in the world. And I think that's such an important concept to understand. And I think that's honestly where people have gotten lost with this right now is we feel like we have to be the best at everything. So I think the most important thing in order to answer that question, you first have to ask yourself, what is my actual goal? Like, is your actual goal to be the strongest person you can be, or is your actual goal to be the strongest runner that you can be? And the answer is different when we're talking about both of those different things. So is there one in particular that you want me to discuss? I'm assuming we want to talk about like what strong means for runners.
What strong means for runners, because, you know, when you ask that question, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are going to be like, well, I want to be strong and a good runner. I want to be the best at everything. We're type A runners. You know, we want to get A pluses across the board. But then there's other runners who are like, I hate strength training. I want the minimum effective dose. So, so let's talk about both of those. Minimum effective dose first. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So minimum effective dose that's kind of like my wheelhouse, because that's how I feel. Just to be completely honest, like I love running. Running is something that has always been very much a passion of mine. And strength training for me, I never really was passionate about it, especially when I was younger. It was one of those things where it's like, I was playing a sport, and with that sport, you had to go to the gym to do a couple lifts. And I was like, this is so boring. Like, I don't want to do this. I really enjoyed kind of the more endurance type of events, and less the strength training type of events. So personally, I have never enjoyed strength training. I do it because I know that it benefits my running. And in that sense, I kind of fall into the category of like, okay, what's the minimum amount that I need to be doing in order to see benefits from it without spending my entire day on strength training or really having it kind of take place of my running. So in terms of like minimum effective dose, it's really going to depend on what point of the training cycle that you're at. And I believe we'll go into this a little bit later, but the best way to really, and this kind of goes for everyone too, but the best way to really have strength training be effective is to almost look at your training cycle as different periods. So you have one period, which is very obvious. Like if you're in an active race training cycle, if you have a race on your calendar within, 12 to 16 weeks, that means that you're in a race training cycle. Before that, if you don't really have a race, let's say it's July and your next race is next April, you have that on your mind, obviously, but you don't necessarily need to start training for that running wise. So that could be the time when it's like, okay, I know that I'm going to be ramping up my running. You can still be running very much, but it might be time to focus a little bit more on strength training. And that can look like 2 to 3 times per week, a little bit longer, maybe 20 to 40, 45 minute strength sessions. Like that's really the minimum amount you want to actually be able to see changes and get stronger. And then as you get closer into your race training cycle, you can lower that a little bit, maybe 1 to 2 times a week, 15 to 30 minute strength training sessions. So that's what I think of like minimum effective amount. And then obviously we could kind of go into like, what does effective even mean? Like what are we actually doing this for? Which I'm assuming we will get into as well, but I can talk about the other side of this too, if you want me to go into that next.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll get into that part first, but yeah, talk about the other side where people are like, well, I want to be good at everything. Because I see I don't know if we can call it a trend, but I see a lot of people that are like, I want to be a hybrid athlete. I want to be great at running. I want to be super buff. I want to be in the gym and be super, super strong. And so these people they have dual goals and they want to be good at everything, which, in my opinion is great. That's a very well-rounded athlete, but are you going to be the best runner if you're a hybrid athlete? I'm going to say no, but people might not care about that. They might say, I want to be really good at both. And it's okay if I sacrifice a little on each side.
Well, that's exactly where kind of the secret lies in that is, you cannot physically, and I'll get into like what that actually means, like biophysiologically with your musculature, but you cannot physically be the best at both strength training and endurance events at the exact same time. That doesn't mean you can't focus on one a little bit at one point of the season and other point of the season, which we will talk about. But I really, with those types of athletes, the ones who are like, want to be really, really good at everything all at once, which I would go and say is a pretty large population of runners, because I think we kind of get lost in this idea that like, if you're not good at one thing, then you're not good at the other. And social media really makes us feel like you have to be super strong. You have to be super fast. You have to run really long distances. And so I start to see a lot of athletes who almost have conflicting goals. Like when I talk to some of my athletes in discovery calls, or I'm like, hey, what are some of your goals? Some athletes will say, I want to race my fastest 5K. I want to race my fastest marathon. I want to start my ultra marathon training, and I want to add in strength training into my program. And I'm like, that's cause for an injury. That's cause for burnout. Like, you cannot physically be the best at every single one of those. However, just like what you said, if there's an athlete who's like, look, I just want to be fit. Like, that's my goal. I just want to be, whatever quote unquote fit means, which a lot of people tie that to appearance. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
To be fit doesn't mean you look a certain way, even though diet culture has us believe that sometimes we do. However, if you kind of are just like, I just want to be real, I love both strength training and running. I want to spend my time doing both of those. I say, great. Just be honest with yourself. If there is actually a goal that you have in mind, like running a PR in the marathon or like racing your fastest times, that something might have to give at some point.
Right.
Or if you want to PR in your squat, in your 1 rep max squat, like then maybe you're not going to be running your fastest times and running your longest times either, because you just cannot physiologically do that without performance enhancement drugs, without without maybe a little bit of help that some people on social media might not be disclosing. So sometimes it seems like it's too good to be true in many types of people. But realistically, when we think about like actually how us as humans work biophysiologically, how our musculature works, there are, to put it very simply, and this is an incredibly oversimplification, but I think it just helps to understand these things. You have fast twitch muscle fibers and slow twitch muscle fibers. And you kind of have to pick one if you want to really, really be good at something. And that's why the fastest sprinters in the world are also not the ones that are winning marathons. Right?
Exactly.
It's like you just can't, and it's amazing that they're really, really good at their sport. And that's because they spend time being really good at what they have to be good at. And everything else is kind of on the side.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the person who comes to mind with a huge body transformation going from marathoner to hybrid athlete is Ryan Hall. He's an American marathoner, set records, fastest guy to run Boston, like all sorts of crazy stuff that he did. And you looked at him when he was a professional runner, skinny as a stick and, was not focused on strength training. And now the guy looks like a tank. But I promise you, he can't run a marathon anywhere near what he could do before.
And his goals are probably different now, which is totally fine. And that's what I think is the most important thing, is like, you really have to be honest with yourself about what your goals actually are, because your goals aren't like, it's not wrong to have the goal that you want to be strong and you want to run. That's a great goal to have. That's not a problem. It just becomes a problem when you start to ask a little bit too much of yourself. And then again, that's where you can fall into this cycle of injuries, burnout, many worse things like disordered eating, like all of that type of stuff, exercise addiction, things like that can really become major problems that could potentially put you out of the sport overall. So I think that's the danger of social media right now, especially with this kind of hybrid training becoming way more popular, is it gives people this idea that like they're not doing enough. And what I try to put out on my page is like, okay, pick your goal. And if you follow me, I love that you love strength training. I love that you love hybrid training, but I'm always going to be true to myself. Like running will always come first for me. And so that's why I always try and put out there, like, have strength training work for you. It doesn't have to be the most important thing. And there are times in your training cycle when you can focus on it more that is beneficial. But for me personally, I have very specific running goals in my training. And that's what I'm going to post about, because that's just authentic to me.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's swing back to the people who are focused on the marathon or the half marathon. So, it is July right now as we're talking, and that means this is the start of fall marathon, fall half marathon season. So people are gearing up to that. And they're saying to themselves, okay, and maybe I've got the running part figured out, but what do I need to do for strength training? And the message that a lot of people preach, I am one of them, is lift heavy. And people are like, okay, well, what does that mean? So what does it mean? So I want to quote unquote lift heavy. And obviously that depends on how strong I currently am. But like if I go into the gym or I'm buying myself some dumbbells, which ones do I buy?
Good question. So obviously lifting heavy is subjective. Like 15 pounds might be heavy for someone and 50 pounds might be heavy for someone else. So heavy really means like it's based on the amount of repetitions that you can do in a specific set. We do actually have some data to show that like lifting until failure, meaning like you literally cannot lift another, like cannot do another squat, cannot do another bench press. That is not necessarily the most beneficial, but technically if you're lifting heavy, you want to be able to get about 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps and feel like, okay, if I had to add another set to this, like that would be really, really hard to do. So it's based on your effort level. It's based on how it feels for you. And lifting heavy, can be a million different things. Like I just mentioned, could be 5-pound weights for some people if they've never lifted. Now, the dangers of saying you should lift heavy in July when you have a fall marathon on your calendar is many people may not have ever lifted before. And to them, I say, don't just start lifting heavy right now when you're in the middle of a marathon training cycle or just starting a marathon training cycle and have never lifted before. And all of a sudden you're just going to start adding super heavy weights. Maybe hold off a little bit on that. I really think heavy lifting is super beneficial in kind of a base building period or even in your off season when it comes to strength training. Adding it into a marathon training program could potentially increase your overall volume, make you feel less recovered for your runs, and even potentially put you at injury risk. Again, there are some ways that you can do it, like especially if you're working with a trainer specifically and you're very careful and you're picking like 3 or 4 exercises, maybe 2 times a week, and you're just like very aware of what's going on. You have your sleep under control, your recovery under control. There are certain people who can tolerate it. But for, novice runners, someone who is just training for their first marathon, someone who is really, really ramping up their training, I wouldn't say just start lifting heavy the first time while you're in an active marathon training cycle, because there are inherently risks to it, because the purpose of lifting heavy is to challenge your muscular system. And in order to challenge your muscular system, you actually have to break apart your muscle fibers to then put them back together, which is an amazing thing you can do if you want to get stronger. But it's not the best thing that you can do if you also have like a 40-mile week on top of that.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we should be lifting something that we can do 8 to 12 times. Take a break, rest and recover, which we hate doing. We want to just get it all done with all at once. We want to turn this into an endurance workout. So we rest and then we can do it 2 times, maybe 3 times. That's what we're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, like subjective, right?
Sure.
So I think what a lot of runners think when they hear lifting heavy is they immediately think squat rack. Right? Which is like not, it's just not like, you don't need to have a squat rack to lift heavy. You can very much do it with dumbbells. So to kind of answer your question, like it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be joining a gym or putting a squat rack in your home. But for some, it might mean that, especially for more intermediate or advanced runners who have lifted in the past. So it really depends.
Yeah. And like you said, I think that's a really good point, is you can do all of this at home if you want to.
Yes.
You can do all of this with a few sets of dumbbells. It doesn't have to have fancy equipment. If you do go to a gym and you are motivated by that, great. But it doesn't have to be this super complicated thing. I think that's the other thing that I run into a lot is that people try to overcomplicate this. And they say, oh, well, I need runner specific and I need to lift heavy and I need to do all these things. And then they just are overwhelmed that they don't do it. So do we need to be doing quote unquote runner specific exercises?
That's just a buzz term. And look,
Okay.
like we're all guilty of using it. Like I've used it in my reels in the past
Sure.
and everything. And at this point, I've kind of, I almost go through a period of reflection every single time I post something now. I'm like, is this going to be more damaging for people to hear than it is helpful? So I've kind of started to back away from that word, especially as it kind of picks up this like media type of attention, like running specific. What does that even mean? Right?
A squat's a squat.
So a squat's a squat. And guess what? I could argue that a squat is running specific. I've also heard people say it's not running specific. So it's like, what does that even mean? A lot of people will say it means like single leg exercises. And like, yeah, do single leg exercises. Also do double leg exercises. Mm-hmm. Like it just, it doesn't have to be always running specific. The one thing I would say that kind of goes back to that idea of periodization, which you'll hear me talk about a lot, which is just like, okay, as you get closer to your goal event, you want things to become more specific to how you're going to be doing them during that event. So for example, if your goal event is a marathon, then you might want to start out your lifting as like double leg and slowly move towards single leg, right? Because it becomes more specific. Running is a single leg sport. That's right. An argument I can make. However, I've also had a lot of athletes who feel really good and very comfortable doing double leg exercises the entire period, and they feel best that way. And that's what's most helpful to them. So running specific really, I think we have to just be very clear that that is definitely like a buzzword that you see on Instagram, and you could make an argument for any kind of strength exercise that it's running specific. I think that strength training is important for runners to do, but ultimately running is going to be the most running specific exercise that you do for you. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, we talked a little bit about periodization within a year or in a cycle. Let's talk about the timing of your strength training. So what I see all of the time is people come to me and they're like, okay, well, I run Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I lift Tuesday, Thursday. And that works for their schedule because, I don't know, they have an hour a day that they can devote to exercise. And they are running, lifting hard, running hard, lifting hard, running hard. Is there a problem with that?
Yes. So the first thing I want to say is, first of all, that schedule might be the only one that works for you. And if it's like timing wise, if it's like that's how you have to do things, then running Monday, lifting Tuesday, running Wednesday, lifting Thursday, running Friday, if that's the only way you can also do strength training with your runs, then have at it. However, what I think you and I are both thinking in our minds is like, then you probably should not be lifting the heaviest you can, because again, the risk of burnout, right? So you want to be really aware of how much recovery time you're leaving between sessions. And if you are spending every single day going hard on the effort level, then you're going to burn out or you're going to ask for an injury, right? And that's based on effort. So if you're running hard, lifting hard, running hard, lifting hard, that's not the best combination. However, you can run hard, lift a little bit lighter, run hard, lift a little bit lighter, because you're leaving more time for your body to recover, which is totally fine and can be effective.
After a short break, I'll be back with more of my conversation with Dr. Victoria Sekely. If you're a marathoner or half marathoner, now is the time to plan for success. Instead of relying on motivation or going at it alone, come join me and an amazing group of runners just like you on the PR team. It's a virtual running team and so much more. You'll get a custom training plan for all your running, strength, mobility, mental strength workouts, and more, all based on your fitness, goals, and lifestyle. You'll get all your questions answered by me and our super supportive team in a private online running community. And the coolest part is that you get access to an exclusive weekly private podcast just for the team. It's this sweet spot between just getting a DIY plan and full-on private coaching, even though you'll get lots of individual attention, all for a lot less than you might think. Team spots are limited, so sign up today at theplantedrunner.com/group. That's theplantedrunner.com/group. My favorite way to get all my stinky running clothes clean is with Earth Breeze. Earth Breeze Eco Sheet look just like a dryer sheet, but it's ultra concentrated laundry detergent. It eliminates stains and odors while being kind to the planet and your skin. No more ugly, heavy plastic laundry jugs filled with messy blue goo, which we all know is mostly water. Earth Breeze comes in a lightweight cardboard envelope that hardly takes up any space in your laundry room. And they offer flexible subscriptions delivered right to your door for free. If you decide to go back to your old stuff for some reason, you'll get a full refund on your Earth Breeze purchase, no questions asked. My clothes are clean, they smell fresh, and I never have to feel guilty dragging home the big orange jug from the store again. Right now, you can receive 40% off Earth Breeze just by going to earthbreeze.com/plantedrunner. That's earthbreeze.com/plantedrunner to cut out single-use plastic in your laundry room and the landfill. That's 40% off your subscription at earthbreeze.com/plantedrunner. And we're back with more of my conversation with Dr. Victoria Sekely. The other thing that I argue is that you're also leaving performance on the table.
Yes.
You know,
100%.
That's the most persuasive argument for most people is that you're trying so hard to do all these things, but yet if you're not recovered, you can't lift as hard and then you can't run as fast because you're just never giving yourself a break to get refreshed. So, you know, when it comes to running on the track, you're sore from your lifting. And then when it comes to lifting, you're sore from your running. So, you know, I would say if you could shorten your runs to 45 minutes, lift for 15 minutes, that's a better option. You know,
it's also going to depend again on what your goals are. So
yes,
that's
true,
that's
true.
always what it comes back down to. Like if your goals in that season, if you're like, well, I don't have a race on my calendar, so it doesn't really matter, then you could run easy, lift hard. Run easy, lift hard, right? It really is going to depend on what your goals are. If you're in a base building period, maybe then you're like, okay, I want to do a little bit of increasing my running, a little bit of increasing my strength. Then you can do exactly what Claire said, like 40, you shorten the runs a little bit, 45-minute run, 15-minute strength. You can get more runs in for the week, maybe a little bit more strength training in the week, and you're in a base building period. So, but I wouldn't recommend that necessarily if your like goal is to get stronger. Then maybe you want to spend more time and more energy on your lifts. So then your running has to get easier. So again, like we get so lost in this idea that everyone is doing everything at 100% all of the time. And it's just not realistic. It's not what elite athletes do. And we can take a page out of their book because really that's what their training is going to look like. It looks like they're lifting heavy, but that's their off season. Right. And then, and they'll be the first ones to tell you as they get closer to their season, it's going to become more running. And maybe they have more time for strength in their day than like us normal people who have like real job or not real. Sorry. Let's take that out. Their jobs are very real. That's not what I meant. Okay. Who have like normal people jobs, then that would be, you know, because we're not like elite like they are, then we don't have as much time for training as they do. So we just have to really be aware of what time do we actually have. Be realistic with yourself. If you are working 50 hours a week, then you're probably not going to have enough time for all of the running, all of the lifting, and showing up at your job and recovering well, and something's going to be left on the table. Whether, like Claire said, that's performance or injuries popping up, like just start to be real about what your goals are, and that helps you decide what to prioritize. Yes. And then it becomes less stressful, and then you feel like, okay, well, I have a race on my calendar in 4 weeks. I'm really, really tired. I can skip this strength day, and I'm going to be okay. Right. And you start to feel a lot better and like less anxiety about that type of stuff because you know what your goals are and you know what to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very good point. So, you know, I was touching on this a little bit earlier. What runners tend to do is we turn every strength session into an endurance session. We're doing, you know, 15 reps And then we take a break for 10 seconds and then we look at the clock and we're like, God, I hate this. I'm going to get it over with. We rush through it. Standing around at the gym or at home is super boring. We are used to grinding. And so we translate that into our strength session. So is that really a problem?
Yes and no. So if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I would have had, or even like 6 months ago, I would have been like, don't do strength training for like high repetitions. Don't make your strength workout a cardio workout. Like that's not going to be beneficial. I'm going to, first of all, there's nuance to that. So I'm going to try and give you some nuance here. Let's use the example of a calf raise, because I feel like this is what's most commonly people do, like 5 reps of 100 sometimes,
right? Sure.
Right. Quite a lot of reps. So we can't necessarily say that is bad or wrong to do. Again, it just matters what your goals are. So if your goal is, I want to make my calf muscle stronger, then that is probably not the best way to make it stronger. The best way to actually build strength in your muscular system is to lift heavy. So you're going to want to slow down your repetitions, make sure they're good quality, make sure you're getting the full range of motion of the muscle, which you cannot do if you're rushing through it. And make sure that you're picking a weight that, again, 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, that feels hard for you, right? When the goal is to build that muscle. However, there might come a period in time when you want to mimic the demands of running and mimic what running looks like. And this could all be in a rehab timeframe. This could be in again, matching up with your training cycle timeframe. Doing 3 sets of 100 reps might be beneficial to mimic the demands of running, because you are taking 1,000 steps a mile, right? And you are really quickly asking for strength and endurance from that muscle when you're running. So what I want people to hear when I say that is, number one, always, if you have an injury, please go see a physical therapist, because it's going to depend on what the injury is like, what point of the injury you're at, what point of training you're at. Depends on what your rehab is going to look like. Number 2, think about what your goals are. So if let's say your Achilles or your calf muscle really, really bothered you during a training cycle, but now you have some time off to actually work on the true strength of that muscle, which is going to help you reduce your risk next time around. That's when you're going to want to focus on very quality lifts, spend that time lifting heavy. So I understand if that's confusing. I guess what I want to say is neither answer is wrong to do, but it is wrong if you're kind of like lying to yourself and saying like, this is the best way to work that muscle.
Right.
Because there is no best way. It's going to depend on a million different things, right? So again, maybe last year I would have said the best quality way to build strength in that calf muscle is to lift heavy and do 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps. Now I changed my answer to, yes, that's very important to do at a certain period of time, but it doesn't mean that that's better than another way.
Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And, and then we don't need to get too far in the weeds into this, but there is a difference between weightlifting, which is to build strength, and bodybuilding, which 100%. Is to grow physical muscle. So 100%. when you want to grow your physical muscles bigger, then you actually do want to lift light for a lot of times. That's what Arnold Schwarzenegger did,
Exactly. And again, neither of these are wrong. Like maybe it's also just, we're looking at it as a different stimulus for that muscle.
Right.
And our body really likes variety. So sometimes it can be good to do both. I don't want people to hear this and just start doing 3 sets of 100 calf raises though. That's not the answer here. That really isn't. Ultimately, the best way to simplify strength training is to, choose 4 to 5 exercises, 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, whatever heavy means for you that day, and progress them weekly. Right.
And that
very simple. Yeah.
Is whether it's the most effective or not, and we could say it's the most effective, it's the most efficient.
It's the most efficient.
Most time efficient.
Done. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I don't want to like confuse people with my answer because I can understand how that comes off as confusing. But I also want to kind of like add that part at the end where it's like, no, but we also want to keep things simple, and sometimes simple is the best way.
Yeah, so. For sure. For sure. So let's talk about soreness real quick, because a lot of runners, if they're new to an exercise, they get sore. And then we also have this, and believe me, I get it too, is we have this feeling if we're not sore, we didn't work hard enough. And we have this badge of courage or honor. Oh, I'm sore today because I lifted so heavy. We tell ourselves this. So what's your feeling about soreness?
First of all, soreness, the amount of soreness that you have does not correlate with how effective your strength training was. That's just a straight up fact. So I never measure this amount of soreness. Like, you can be sore if you stopped lifting for 2 weeks and kind of started back where you're at. Does that mean it's any less or any more efficient than it was before? No. You can also be working on one specific lift, like improving your squat, getting stronger in your quads and glutes and hamstrings. But because you've been working on it for so long, you might not feel sore. Does that mean you're not making progress? Absolutely not. It just means your body's getting better at doing that, which is a good thing. You want it to do that, right? So soreness, it's not a good measure, period, right, that to measure effectiveness or quality of a workout. So I don't think, also similarly, the amount that you sweat is not a good correlation to effectiveness of a workout. It's just simply not. So I think in general, what we should be focusing on more is kind of like the bigger picture, which is ultimately consistency and just kind of doing what you can. And whether that means, okay, I can't lift for 30 minutes today, but I can lift for 15 minutes. 15 minutes is better than 0 minutes. Right? So focus on what you can control. Don't worry about how sore you feel. Don't really worry about like, okay, I didn't get to every single exercise today. Just stay consistent, stick to your plan, and that's how you're going to see progress, right?
Absolutely.
So ultimately, soreness is not the measure for that.
Right. And avoid soreness if you can. Go underneath that level if you can.
But also something I hear from a lot of runners, like, and because we're in like marathon training season, this is very appropriate, is runners who are like increasing their long runs and they're like, oh my gosh, my knees felt so sore the next day. Is something wrong? And it's like, no, that soreness doesn't mean injury either, right? Mm-hmm. Soreness can just be a result of, oh, you're building, you're increasing your run training. And I hear that so commonly, so frequently from athletes, like, my knee feels so sore, I did something wrong, I have to take the next 4 days off. And it's like, no. You're doing the right thing. Your body's responding. Soreness is a way that sometimes you can tell, like, okay, yeah, I had a hard effort yesterday that maybe I haven't done in a while. I went on a 10-mile run when the last one was 8 miles, right? So like, soreness isn't a bad thing either in many cases, depending on what your goals are.
Sure. Yeah. There's a difference between soreness and pain. There is.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to know. Sometimes it's hard to make that distinction. So if you are feeling sore after every single workout, I would question that. And I would be like, you're probably doing a little bit too much. Like, we need some easy days. We need some recovery days. But feeling sore after a hard effort isn't wrong either.
Right.
So, and it doesn't mean injury or pain. So,
yeah. Very, very good point. So what are your tips for adding in some strength training for people who just hate it? Like, what are your tips for making it a habit that we can stick to, that we can do?
Yeah. Making it a habit ultimately comes back to things that you can add into your day that are not overwhelming. So this is why I hate things like, and hate is a strong word, but this is genuinely how I feel about programs like 75 Hard, which basically is like, every new year it comes back around, which is like going super hard on something is going to like make it a habit. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The best way to make something habit is to make it actionable in a way that like you can see yourself doing for a very long time, not just for 75 days. And that means, again, minimum effective dose. So how little do you have to spend your time strength training? Like I said, 15 to 30 minutes, 1 to 2 times per week. That could be a very, very reasonable goal for most people. It should be. And that can help you develop that habit. For a lot of people, after doing that for many, many weeks, they start to realize, oh, wow, I've been strength training for 30 minutes when I started at 15 minutes, because it's just become a part of your routine and it can really build and grow from there. But you don't want to have this idea that it has to be done perfectly at 100%. The first day you try and do something, especially if you don't like it, like don't force yourself to like it. That's not going to be helpful for you from a mentally perspective and physically. I think it's just about like, do the bare minimum. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're not working hard. It just means that you're focusing on things that you do enjoy while recognizing that there are some things you may not enjoy as much that are still important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is a perfect summation there. Before I let you go, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with you, because I follow you on Instagram and everybody should follow you as well. And you've been sharing some struggles lately, especially over the past year. And honestly, you've been like super vulnerable, which is scary. I've been there. It's hard. It is not easy. So I would love for you, if you'd like to share a little bit for people who don't know your story, about what's going on with you.
Yeah. So where do I even start? Earlier this year, I guess the best place to start is I had a half marathon on the calendar, which was like mid-April. And I went out, and after the first 3 miles, I experienced my first ever panic attack, which has literally never happened to me. And it was really an eye-opening moment to put me back in therapy, which has been the best thing ever, but also kind of sit back and think about what are my goals with running in general. And I think that actually is kind of like a full circle moment. Is, it can be really easy to get lost in other people's goals. Boston qualifying times, marathons every season, getting faster, getting stronger. Like we see this all day on social media. So I understand what it feels like to feel overwhelmed with like, okay, but what do I actually want to do? And I got very lost in that this spring when I wanted to PR my half marathon, and I am thinking about a spring marathon, and like all of these conversations. I wanted to be strong and all of this stuff, but also, and I'm sure you can relate to this, being on social media has played a huge role in terms of me feeling like anxious to perform and post my times and all of that type of stuff. So it all came to head during that half marathon, which is honestly probably the best thing that could have happened for me, because it needed to happen at some point. So I used that as kind of my avenue to get myself back in therapy. I've been discussing a lot of those pieces to the puzzle, because there are many pieces to it, a lot of like personal stuff that I don't share as well that I've had to unpack. And currently I'm at this point where I feel a lot better with all of that stuff that I dealt with in the spring. However, now I'm kind of feeling like, because obviously running is my passion, but right now it's also my job. Right. So it's hard for me to find that balance currently. Like this is my kind of most recent struggle that I'm talking through in therapy.
Yes.
Like every run that I've been going on, it's almost like I'm thinking about what content should I post next? What should I post on Instagram? All of that type of stuff. It's hard for me to get excited about my training again because it feels like work. It's also really hard to talk about running all day with all of my athletes, which, do not get me wrong, this is what I've wanted forever in my whole life, and I would not change it for anything. But what I'm struggling now with is to be excited about my actual runs, because it's almost like there's too much running, right? Like everything's about running. That's why I tell a lot of people, like, I have a podcast, I'm on your podcast, but I actually don't really listen to like other running podcasts because it just gets to be too, like, I can't talk about running anymore. So I watch my Bravo TV and like, trying to find a little bit more balance. I went on a vacation a couple weeks ago where I took a full week off running. That felt very therapeutic. So I don't have the answer quite yet, but that is and has been my most recent struggle. Is I know I am going to be running another marathon. I do have a couple half marathons on my calendar. I'm not sure how excited I am about my own training, and I'd like to get there again. But I've really kind of needed this time away from my own running just to kind of manage it all, which I think has been the right move for now. What the next step is, I don't know. But so that's where I'm currently at. And again, would not change this for the world. All I want to be doing all day is working with athletes and runners and talking about this stuff, but just figuring out how to balance that, I think, is the next step.
Yep. I 100% can relate to absolutely everything you said. I get it. Yeah, it's tough when you feel like you have a platform and you're on a stage and you're eat, breathe, sleep, drink, running all the time. It's it's a lot, even if it is your passion. Yeah, it's a lot. So
exactly.
Balance is, I don't know if balance exists. I don't think it does. I really don't think it does. But I think periodization, like we were talking about, that exists. There's no actual balance.
Exactly. Like, realistically, I am going to have to start a training cycle again. That is going to have to happen. That I am going to have to up my training. I am going to have to do that. And I'm not going to like stop my job because of that, So it's like, there's going to come a time when I have a lot of that running again. So like you said, does balance exist in those periods? Maybe not, but that's why I'm using this period right now to step back from my own training. And that has been super helpful. And it's also going to help me feel more motivated, which is exactly what happens when runners take a step back from running and maybe work on strength training. Then the next run training cycle, you feel more motivated again for that. And a lot of people see that as losing fitness. That's actually not the best way to look at it. It's just changing your fitness so that you can show up even better for the next one.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap this up. But before I let you go, where can the people find you and follow your journey?
Instagram is the best spot, which is at Train Smart Run Strong. I also have my website, trainsmartrunstrong.com. I am currently actively posting on TikTok, which I'm having a lot of fun with because it's kind of different than Instagram. It's another part of things. It's like, it feels, I don't know, for some reason feels like less pressure, maybe because I have less followers and it's kind of more like ranting on there versus like very curated posts. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. So you can find me on TikTok as well. And my podcast, which season 2 will be coming out soon, which is also Train Smart Run Strong. So pretty easy to.
Yes, perfect. Branding all across the board. Love it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this has been so much fun, Victoria. As always, I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire.
And now it's time for the Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. Today's topic is let go of what you cannot change. When conditions aren't right for your run, it's easy to focus on how much harder the run is than it should be. It's too hot or too cold, or your legs feel heavy, it's raining, or you didn't get enough sleep. Anytime we do something hard, our comfort-seeking brain tries to get us to stop. And it does this by sending negative thoughts. The moment we start to listen to those thoughts, the run gets even harder. So the key is to let them go. Recognize that you cannot change the weather or how much sleep you got last night, and let those thoughts come and go. Yes, the conditions of your run will stay the same, but the negative thoughts making the run even worse will begin to disappear. Thank you for listening to The Planted Runner, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Don't forget that you can win free access to one of my sprint session masterclasses just for writing an Apple Podcast review. So be sure to write yours right after your run today. Reviews are the #1 way to boost this show's reach, and it's a great way to tell me what you'd like to hear next because I read every single one. Have a great run today.
Women's Running Stories, where we explore the intersection between running and life. Because every woman who is committed to a running journey has a story to tell, and this is where you'll find those stories. I am host and producer Cherie Louise Turner. I'm a 53-year-old runner, and together with original music by musician and runner Cormac O'Regan, we bring these inspirational stories to life. Please join us to fuel your adventures.